The last heir returned to find their throne occupied by another. The first useful detail in the heir's throne wasn't empty when they returned, is not the crown on the throne. It is the burn decree under the crown, pressed flat by royal gold and wet ash. The chronicler touches the page and sees victory arriving too late. The throne room does not look conquered. Rain falls through the roof and turns the ash to paste. The chronicler kneels by the dais and slides the burned decree out from under the crown. A kitchen boy holds the lamp close enough to see the seal soften. The oath court smells of lamp oil and iron. The crown princess presses her thumb below the rival heir's name, and the old judge tries to sand the wet ink. He stops when the blood in it darkens. Nobody at the table looks at the door. The date on the decree is 3 hours before the siege bell. The royal household crossed the river, while the city still believed the gates would hold. The chronicler reads the line once without sound. The boy hears his own stomach answer before any judge does. Outside, loyal banners still hang from the balcony. Inside, the page removes their protection with one line. A house that sent sons to the wall becomes a rebel house before sunset. The soldiers do not know it yet. Their mothers still think the law is on their side. The order keeps grain for continuity of blood. On the floor below it, ration bowls are stacked like skullcaps. The boy reaches for one, then pulls his hand back because the crown touches the paper. Law still scares him, even here. The princess does not plead. She keeps her burned wrist flat on the table, while the judge warms the seal. When the wax drops, her hand does not move. That is what frightens the judge, not guilt but practice. From there, the chronicler could hide the page and let the heir have a clean victory. Instead, he carries it toward the broken windows. Wet ash clings to the gold like black flour. The first accusation in the room is lifted before it is spoken. The claimant is not in the room. His empty chair is enough. The oath gives him authority to protect the bloodline, and the word protect lands like a blade wrapped in silk. Every person present understands the trick, but the seal lands versant. A guard corpse lies with one hand under the throne step. The fingers are curled around a splinter from the grain door, not a sword-high LT. That small piece of wood does more damage than a battle map. It says the first fight was over food. One clerk tries to leave a gap in the copy. The princess notices. She takes the pen from him and fills the space herself, slow enough for the witnesses to watch. After that, the clerk writes smaller. The kitchen boy asks whether the crown is cursed. The chronicler almost says no. Then the wax on the decree dents under his thumb, soft as if the seal has just been pressed. The room has cooled, but the order has not. By dawn, the court has made betrayal portable. It can be carried to a gate, a granary, a treasury, and still call itself law. The judge shuts the book with both hands. A smear of blood crosses the royal crescent. The next room does not widen the legend. It narrows the blame until one hand, one order, and one cost can be seen together. At the river granary, the lie becomes wheels and weather. The guard captain turns the locked grain measure upside down in front of the ration line. Nothing falls out. Behind him, royal wagons leave through the back gate with canvas tied over the sacks. The counting room is warmer than the street. The treasury clerk weighs 3 clipped coins beside a list of unpaid soldiers. A wounded messenger leans on the table and bleeds onto the payroll he came to collect. The clerk moves the silver anyway. A lower ward mother sets her bowl on the stones. Barley dust blows past it and sticks to her sleeves. She watches the captain read the princess's order twice. On the second reading, he lowers his spear and stops looking at the crowd. The private coffer is marked for the claimant in a hand nobody bothers to disguise. That is the arrogance of a dying court. It does not hide theft. It files theft before the victim reaches the counter. The messenger watches the lock turn. The city is not starving because the grain is gone. It is starving because the grain has been assigned a better class of body. The royal wagons cross the wet yard one at a time. Each wheel leaves a pale stripe where flour spills through the CMS. Outside, the wall guard is sent back with empty purses and split boots. One man stares at the closed treasury door. Another sits on the curb and pulls a nail out of his soul. Neither of them knows their pay has already crossed the river. A boy runs beside the last wagon until a soldier hits him with the spear shaft. The bowl in his hand cracks, but he keeps both halves. The captain sees that and turns away. Obedience is easier when it can look busy. The clerk's mistake is mercy. He leaves the scale pan unwashed. Blood gathers in the grooves around the coin dust, dark and exact. When the chronicler finds it later, the stain has dried into the shape of a small crown. The granary doors close before the bells begin. That order matters more than any confession later. It shows the crown choosing what must live first, bloodline before district, seal before mouth, escape before bread. Money changes sides before the army does. That is why the wall falls quietly at first and orders can shout. But hunger negotiates faster. A soldier who has not been paid will still fight. His captain cannot keep him standing forever. When the chronicler reaches the yard days later, the ration bowls are still there. Rainwater has filled them. A rat drinks from the largest one and leaves little feet in the flour decent. The crown did not need monsters. It had schedules. The treasury door has 3 locks. The clerk uses only one. He is not afraid of thieves anymore. The thieves have keys, titles, and a receipt. The western gate opens without a trumpet. The gate lieutenant fits both halves of the split key into the winch box, while the young archer keeps his bow drawn. Chain grease smokes on the lieutenant's hands. The city bells are still silent. The bridge chapel keeps the children behind the altar screen. The absent prince crosses out 3 names on the hostage list and writes their fathers' names instead. The priest says nothing. Candle wax runs over the scratched letters. The archer sees the princess's seal before he sees the enemy. By contrast, that is the wound he never recovers from. He lowers the bow because the order is real. The portcullis rises, and the royal banner hangs above the breach like a witness refusing to blink. It looks like mercy for almost one breath. Then the message leaves the chapel. 3 fathers open 3 roads before nightfall, because their children are still alive. The claimant has learned that kindness can be sharpened. The first soldiers through the gate do not run. They walk because someone has promised them the street will be open. Their boots splash through gutter water and spilled barley. One of them touches the banner pole for luck. The priest turns the altar cloth over to hide the ink that bled through. It does not help. The names appear backward, faint and red, where the cup should stand. He serves no wine that evening. A woman on the wall throws a roof tile at the lieutenant. It misses and breaks against the winch. He flinches harder at the sound than at the accusation. Then he keeps turning the wheel. A child asks whether she can go home. Nobody answers quickly enough. That pause is the entire kingdom in miniature. People waiting for a clean word from mouths already purchased. The breach is legal before it is military. Under pressure, that is the part the surviving houses cannot forgive. An enemy can be hated cleanly. An order with the right seal has to be remembered inside the family. The absent prince does not look cruel in the chapel. Past midnight, that is why the page is hard to bear. He speaks softly. He saves children. He uses the saving as a hinge for surrender. Across the margin, when the gate finally stops moving, the archer still has an arrow on the string. He never looses it. Nearer the source, the chronicler writes that detail down because shame sometimes looks like discipline from far away. By morning, roads open without siege engines. The chapel bell rings for prayer, and for capitulation with the same bronze mouth. The sound carries across the river, sweet enough to be obscene. On the burned stair, the princess wraps a torn banner strip around her ricent. The cloth sticks to the wound. A surviving handmaid holds the last message in both hands and waits for permission to breathe. The returning heir reaches the empty throne room after the fires have thinned. He carries the crown with both hands and places it on the seat instead of on his head. Behind that, the chronicler stands close enough to hear ash fall from the rafters. The princess tells her to carry 1 page and burn the recent. That sounds like confession until the handmaid sees which page survives. It names enough guilt to make history honest, but not enough to save the people still trapped below. No choir answers him. No court rises. No enemy remains grand enough to blame. The room offers only the decree, the oath book, the grain order, the payroll, the key, the hostage list, and the handmaid's page. Sparks crawl up the wall beside them. Quietly, the princess watches the sparks instead of the handmaid. Red thread melts into the skin of her palm. She has the look of someone arranging a room she will never leave. The heir asks for the names to be read again. Halfway through, he sits on the steps below the throne. That is the only human thing he does. A ruler would stand. A survivor sits because his knees have understood before his title does. The handmaid hides the message in her hair. She walks through smoke with her chin down while soldiers shout for water. Nobody searches her because everyone is watching the princess. Power is useful even when it is dying. The crown has not been loosened. That is the horror. It arrives intact after the food. Pay, gates, roads, children, witnesses, and mercy have all been spent to preserve it. The symbol survived because the state was used as kindling. This is where the story becomes ugly. The princess tells the truth only after truth has lost its power to rescue anyone. Her honesty is not redemption. It is another locked door with better handwriting. The chronicler writes the last line slowly. Victory is real. The heir can punish bodies, reverse decrees, and hang banners over the breach. None of it puts bread back in the bowls or blood back in the boys at the wall. At the foot of the stair, the handmaid passes a child carrying an empty bowl. She almost gives him the page. Then a beam falls behind them, and fear does what loyalty could not. As she keeps walking, the heir leaves the crown where it is. For the first time, the throne looks less like a prize than a debt collector. The room does not ask whether he can rule. It asks what rule means after this much obedience. The crown reaches the throne at last. No choir answers it. The heir leaves it on the seat and asks for the names to be read again. The chronicler reads until the room understands the final cruelty. The victory is real, and that is why it cannot comfort anyone. Prince proves his lineage through royal artifacts and restores order to the kingdom. Then the ash ledger closed, and the empty throne recorded one more heir as paid. The princess presses her thumb below the claimant's name, and the judge tries to sand the wet ink. The lieutenant fits both halves of the split key into the winch box, while the archer keeps his bow drawn. On the burned stair, the burned princess wraps a torn banner strip around her ricent. A handmaid holds the last message in both hands and waits for permission to breathe. The heir reaches the empty throne room after the fires have thinned. The chronicler stands close enough to hear ash fall from the rafters. The private coffer is marked for the pretender in a hand nobody bothers to disguise. That is the wound he never recovers from. The rival claimant has learned that kindness can be sharpened. The last room does not say the heir failed to win. It says the heir reached the throne after the kingdom had already spent itself buying that victory. The crown costs more than victory. It costs the realm that made victory worth naming. At dawn, the bread queue reaches the palace bridge. Nobody in the queue chants for justice. They count children, count loaves, and count the guards who will not meet their eyes. The heir can hear the city breathing through the broken windows. That sound does more damage than any accusation. The first punishment is small. A treasury clerk is brought forward with ink on his thumb and blood on one sleeve. He does not deny the ledger. He only asks whether the soldiers were supposed to eat loyalty. The question lands badly because everyone in the hall knows the answer. A captain from the western wall kneels with his helmet under one arm. The helmet is split where a stone hit it during the breach. He says the gate opened legally. He says that is why his men hesitated. No one in the throne room wants a legal wound, because a legal wound has a signature. The hostage list is read after the payroll. 3 fathers are named. 2 are dead. 1 is alive and standing in the room with his hands folded so tightly the knuckles have gone white. When his child's name is spoken, he does not look at the heir. He looks at the crown. By midday, the old judge asks for a clean charge. Treason would be easy. Theft would be easy. Murder would be easy. The problem is that the realm was not murdered in one room. It was moved piece by piece through rooms that all kept records. The heir walks the granary yard before sunset. Rain has softened the flour dust into paste. A child has drawn a crown in it with one finger, then crossed it out. The heir kneels beside the mark and does not touch it. Some evidence should not be repaired by royal hands. That night, the surviving handmaid returns the burned page. She carried it through smoke, hair, river mud, and 2 searches. The page is not enough to save anyone. It is enough to stop the court from pretending ignorance was a shelter. Her hands shake only after she lets it go. When the bells ring, nobody knows whether they mark mourning or succession. The sound moves over empty stalls, unpaid barracks, and houses with doors left open for people who will not return. The heir listens until the bells stop. Then he orders the crown left on the throne, where Det can find it. The regent's chair is carried out licent. It leaves 4 clean squares on the floor where ash cannot settle. A servant points at the marks, then lowers his hand as if pointing has become dangerous. The heir sees it anyway. Even the furniture kept better account than the court. Before midnight, the wall captain brings in the split key. One half is black with grease, the other bright where nervous fingers rubbed it clean. He lays both pieces on the table and steps back. The key does not accuse anyone. It only proves how many loyal hands were needed. The old judge asks whether mercy should be recorded. The heir looks toward the chapel doors and says mercy is already in the hostage licent. It kept children alive so fathers would open roads. Nobody writes that sentence down quickly. Some truths resist becoming neat enough for ink. In the morning, the city begins using the palace steps as a notice board. Missing names go up first, then debts, then accusations written by people who no longer care whether the handwriting can be traced. The crown remains inside, untouched, while the kingdom finally speaks around it. The kitchen boy returns the lamp to the throne room, because no one told him where else light belongs now. He sets it beside the crown and backs away. The flame is small, ordinary, and badly trimmed. It makes the jewels look less like glory than glass. By dawn, the crown cannot